Top 5 Large Diesel Engines of All Time. Link in description below to the full articles. Number 5. KTTA Cummins. The KTTA Cummins was the largest Class 8 engine ever found on America's highways. A square engine, its 6.25-inch bore and stroke made for 1,150 cubic inches, 19 liters, of displacement, and although its original intent was never to power over-the-road trucks, the KTA made its way into them nevertheless. Single-turbo Class 8 versions sported a single turbo and could crank out 600 horsepower, a very big number back in the late 1970s and 1980s. Peak torque from the factory checked in at 1,650 pound-feet, but it's rumored that the KTA had to be fueled conservatively at low RPM to limit torque. That 1,650 pound-feet wasn't available until 1,600 RPM, thereby increasing the lifespan of whatever transmission was bolted up behind it, usually an 8 or 13-speed Eaton Fuller. Like the 855 Big Cam engines of the era, the KTA used Cummins PT, pressure time, fuel system. With little more than fueling and turbo upgrades, the KTA could achieve 4-digit horsepower and still go to work every day of the week. As for high horsepower, truck pulling applications, the 1,150 cubic inch Cummins dominated the ranks of hot rod type semi-classes for years, in large part thanks to its solid foundation and obvious displacement advantage over other Class 8 engines. Now for the best part, there was also a KTTA, the double T meaning twin turbo. The KTTA was primarily reserved for gensets and industrial type use. Number 4. Mack E7. Any diesel produced in the 1980s but that survived a major emissions crunch before being retired is worthy of mention. Mack E7 is one such engine. The E7 line, which consisted of 16 different versions of the same i6, was released in 1988 and underwent several changes, even becoming the E7 E-Tech, during its 20-plus year production run. To many, the 12-liter E7 epitomizes the manufacturer's bulldog logo to a T. Its horsepower ratings ranged from 250 to 460 horsepower, but, in true Mack-like fashion, earth-rotating torque was generated right off idle. The torquiest version of the E7, the 460 horsepower model, turned out 1,660 pound-feet of torque at 1,200 RPM. Also typical of a Mack mill, the 12-liter E7 produced torque numbers that rivaled what larger engines from competing manufacturers were producing at the time. The first E7s were fully mechanical, but electronics would infiltrate the works beginning in the early 1990s. Mack's initial, and partial, electronic control over its fuel system was coined VMAC, Vehicle Management and Control, which added a rack actuator, rack position sensor, and a timing reference sensor to the Bosch inline pump. Mack's Econovance system also brought variable mechanical timing into the picture to help custom-tailor fuel delivery to the end user's needs. In 1998, the E7 received Mack's Electronic Unit Pump (EUP) system, a pump that was cam-driven. By 2003, EGR was making its way onto the revamped 12-liter engine, and the million-mile engine slowly lost its long-time luster. Number 3. 855 Big Cam Cummins. Designed to adhere to the new emission standards set forth in the Clean Air Act of 1976, Cummins released the 855 Big Cam. It soon proved to arguably be the most fuel-efficient, most durable, and most powerful engine available in a Class 8 truck, thereby owning the road for most of the late 1970s and early 1980s. The 14-liter Big Cam 1, for versions would be available in all, possessed a 5.50-inch bore, a 5.98-inch stroke, and most versions were available with power ratings that ranged from 250 to 400 horsepower. However, some 855 Big Cam engines were rated as high as 605 horsepower in genset form. The first 3 renditions of the 855 Big Cam, i.e. Big Cam 1, 2, and 3, utilized Cummins PT, pressure time, fuel system, which allowed for mechanically variable timing. Electronics entered the fold in 1985 aboard the Big Cam 4, but the Big Cam 4 was soon replaced with the N14. Improvements throughout the Big Cam's production run included the demand flow cooling system and pulse exhaust manifold that debuted on the Big Cam 2 engine in 1979, a pressed steel oil pan and Holset HT3B turbocharger added for the Big Cam 3 in 1983, and a revised cylinder head and pulse exhaust manifold for the Big Cam 4 in 1985. Number 2, Detroit 60 Series. Without the Series 60 engine line, Detroit diesel may have continued to lose market share in the 1980s and eventually folded up. Thankfully, that didn't happen. When other engine manufacturers were just beginning to recognize that electronic control was the wave of the future, Detroit developed the 11.1-liter and 12.7-liter from scratch and hit a home run right off the bat. Each engine's unit injection system was completely electronic and performed flawlessly, as did the rest of the engine. In fact, the initial overhaul interval recommendations of 500,000 miles were changed to 750,000 miles soon after these engines were released. It's been documented that Detroit Diesel, owned at the time by GM, reached out to John Deere in the mid-1980s for help in reviving its dying engine program. A short time later, the 60 Series appeared on the scene, which virtually solved every issue the previous 50 Series power plants had before it. Later on in 2001, Detroit set its sights on the larger engine market with the release of its 14-liter engine. This version, possessing a long 6.62-inch stroke and a 5.24-inch bore, was capable of producing 1,650 pound-feet of torque at 1,200 RPM, along with 515 horsepower at 1,800 RPM. Number 1, Caterpillar 3406. There is no denying this engine's presence in the Class 8 world, as thousands of over-the-road trucks still rely on it to propel them all over America in a trouble-free manner. It's the legendary 3406 from Caterpillar, and it's a big reason why legions of truck owners swear by Cat power. Available in A, B, C, and eventually the coveted E model, the 3406 featured a bore of 5.4 inches, a stroke of 6.5 inches, and displaced 893 cubic inches, 14.6 liters. Depending on the model, horsepower ratings ranged from 375 to 465 horsepower, with the highest factory torque output checking in at 1,850 pound-feet of torque. As mentioned, the most revered 3406 carries an E at the end. While the 3406A and 3406B were fully mechanical engines, and the 3406C was a mix of both mechanical and electronics, the 3406E marked the point in time when Cat had mastered and then released a fully electronic unit injection system, circa 1993. Being full-on, electronically controlled meant that the engine control module, ECM, could be recalibrated, and when the right aftermarket reflash was uploaded, some impressive horsepower gains were on the table. This hot rod nature of the 3406E helped develop what became a cult-like following, where 550 and 600 horsepower files were commonplace.